The engines like being the greatest engines on the island of Sodor, like Duncan is pulling some slate trucks from the incline. Boko is speeding on the rails, and Flora is pulling a goods train, and that is why the Fat Controller's engines are the greatest engines on the island of Sodor. One rainy day on the island of Sodor, Edward was making his way home before it starts raining again. "I wish it will stop raining, I wish it will stop raining," moaned Edward. "Don't worry," said his driver, "you'll be fine." They were still at the quarry. Edward didn't know that this was going to be bad, when suddenly there was a broken track down there was a broken track on his line, but Edward didn't know this. His driver seen it and spotted it and told Edward to stop. "Edward," he said, "stop!" But it was too late. Edward came off the rails by accident. But it was too late. Edward came off the rails by accident. "Ow!" said Edward. "What was that?" "There was a broken track," said his driver. "You should have listened." "Sorry," said Edward. Edward was derailed now, and wet because of the rain. There was Kevin. Kevin saw it all. "Are you all right, Edward? I hope you're not hurt." "Course I am not," said Edward. "Don't worry," said Kevin. "I'll call for help." And then Kevin rolled away and zoomed in to tell the Fat Controller about this. While Edward waited for Kevin to call for help. Kevin was doing well and was a very good friend to Edward. He was just in time, and there was the Fat Controller. "What's going on?" he said. "Edward is derailed," he said. "You'll have to help him." "Of course," said the Fat Controller. "I'll send Derek to help him as well." "Who's Derek?" he said. "He came to this railway before you." "Oh, great," said Kevin. And so Kevin rolled away to go back to the quarry. When Derek arrived, the Fat Controller welcomed him. "I hope this time this will make you learn to be a very great engine again." "Yes, sir," said Derek. "Now Edward is derailed, and I want you to bring him back to Tidmouth Sheds." "Edward, sir," he said. "I would be delighted to see him again." And he rolled away. He snickered away to find Edward. He knows, because Derek knows what he is still going to do to Edward. He is going to get his revenge on him for what he really did to him when they last met. But when they arrived at the quarry mine, for what he really did to him when they last met. When Derek arrived at the quarry mine, there was Edward. Just then, Derek said this to Edward. "Hello, Edward." "Ah, not you," he said. "Yes," said Derek. "Your Fat Controller has sent me here to find you, so you'll have to be quick and fast." "You really think so, do you?" said Edward. "Yes," said Derek. And so Kevin arrived, and they were ready to pull him back onto the tracks. And Edward and his tender were back on the rails, and so Derek was ready to do something to him. "I'll take you back to the yards," he said. "But wait a sec." And Derek rolled away. Edward didn't know what Derek had done to him. He knew he was on top of his trucks, but then Derek was ready, and he was going to take him to the smelter's yard. Laughed Derek. "Where are you taking me?" he said. "To an adventure." "Where?" "The Grand Canyon." But Edward didn't know that he was lying, so Derek rolled away with him. Night came, and still it was raining. And just then, Derek was lying to Edward. He took him to the smelter's yard to be scrapped, and that was for his revenge. "Oh no," said Edward, "this isn't the Grand Canyon. It's the smelter's yard." "I was lying," said Derek. "Now for my revenge for what you did to me since we last met," he said. Now you will be in the smelter's yard forever." "I didn't do anything to you," said Edward, but in a hurt voice. "The Fat Controller said he sent you packing." "He was gonna send me packing, but I'm staying in the railway, with you going to the smelter's yard." "That's not true," said Edward. Just then, Derek was about to put him in the smelter's yard when Edward said this. "Help! Help!" said Edward. "Someone! Derek's gonna put me in! Derek's gonna drag me in the smelter's yard!" Derek was so cross, he nearly put him in the smelter's yard when the Fat Controller spoke severely to him. "Derek," he said, "I'm disappointed in you," he said. "You should have taken..." "I'm Derek," he said. "I'm very disappointed in you. You lied to him that you were taking him home, and to the Grand Canyon as well. And you were going to take him to the smelter's yard. You have been naughty. I will be having a word with you tonight," he said. "Oh, thank you," said Edward. "You have been a very naughty engine, Derek. I do not like this at all." Who needs you?" moaned Derek. And then Derek rolled away to take Edward back home. Just then, later at this rainy night, the Fat Controller was still giving Derek a good tell-off and spoke severely to him. "And that, my young engine," he said, "will learn you how bad it is. And that, my young engine," he said, will take you back to the mainland, and that will learn you to be a good engine." "Grrr!" growled Derek and growled away to the mainland, where he really belongs. "You won't be doing this again," said Edward, and the engines were impressed, even Edward, who finally survived his revenge.